human physics in business are the larger an organization, the more humans specialize. That's just the kind of way the human brain works and categorize. That's the legal team. That's the sales team. So you have to start having people that do more than one function. So the value skill set and the needs of early stage are more generalism, more multi-hat.
Welcome to the Profit Answer Man podcast. We believe the purpose of business is to make lots of money. We'll show you how to scale and grow your profit and cash flow, all while working less. We're a big fan of the ELF model. Easy, lucrative, and fun. If you're the backbone of America, you deserve to be well rewarded for that. Listen in to see how other business owners are doing it and how to maximize your profit and cash flow. Welcome to the Profit Answer Man, Casey Wu. It's great to have you join us today.
Thank you for having me.
Can you share a little bit about your businesses and yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. I currently run am a partner in 3 organizations. They all service what I call is the scaler. Specifically, it's high growth, mostly tech operators that are the CFOs, COOs, BizOps, early stage founders of the world. I can talk later about to me, the horizontal generalists. There's Operators Guild, Fog Ventures, and Guild Talent. Operators Guild is the community. It's about 1,200 of us around the world that are some of the top operators in early stage tech. And it's a community for education and events and problem solving and all the kind of usual professional organization things like peer groups, et cetera. Fog Ventures is the investing arm. So we're the top operator syndicate. As the buyers and builders of B2B, we get special access and can add a lot of mutual strategic value. And then Guild Talent. Guild Talent is the talent arm that helps build the teams, hire fractional, permanent for scalers who are at companies, as well as potentially sharing, jobs, et cetera. So that's what I do. But my whole focus and professional mission is on benefiting, enabling, and empowering the scaler. And I'm a proud dad of 3, and I live in the Bay Area.
Nice. So just so everyone's on the same concept, when you say scaler, what do you really mean by scaler?
Yeah, it's a term that I came up with because in the Operators Guild, it's an 11-year organization, personally interviewed over 1,200 operators one-on-one who have applied. So I'm the co-founder, and then now it's 1,200 members. And I started to realize there's a pattern. It took me 8 years, almost 9 years, to realize that I was not understanding what was happening. The Operators Guild is one of the few paid community organizations that has grown 120x now organically, word of mouth. We don't have a sales team. We don't have, a marketing push. It's just people loving the group and telling others. So after a while, I was like, well, this is interesting. Look who's in the group. CFO. So we're direct and above. So finance, CFO, COOs, VPs of ops, heads of biz ops, early stage founders, rev ops, strategy, chiefs of staff. And they all got along together, meaning we were not just doing chief of staff group or only COOs or only CFOs. But for some reason, these particularly 7 titles kept showing up and not going to other groups. And what I realized is we are not defined by our titles like other careers, like sales, marketing, legal. That's pretty good definition of what they do. In early stage, CFO, COO, chief of staff are all filler words for horizontal scaling. And so I collectively call us scalers, where our specialty is actually knowing a little bit about all the functions and building it and leveraging it together versus being any vertical specialist. And so that's who I call scalers.
Out of curiosity, when you look at vertical specialists, what I tend to find in businesses is they become siloed. They're very good at their lane, and all their answers are perfect for their lane, but sales doesn't understand driving cash flow. And they don't even necessarily understand pricing, nor do they understand how to work with operations to make sure that we can actually deliver what they sold. It sounds like your group has people that are much broader spectrum that they can talk across all of those. Am I getting that right?
Yeah. At any organization, you'll have the usual departments, silos, sales, marketing, product, engineering, legal, et cetera. But of course, I think the forgotten people are the ones who have to stitch it all together, work cross-functionally. Their titles at early stage, are the common 7, right? It's like rev ops, biz ops, chief of staff, CFO, COO, CEO. And yes, for them to do their job well, They have to get along with many different types of personas, understand the business and all the moving parts. And I liken it to like arteries or the nervous system in the body. It's not an organ like a heart or a kidney. Those are specialists. It's actually the thing that connects all the organs, feeds it all, grows together. It's that analogy. So yes, I think both are very important. You need a dedicated sales team, right, to know what they're doing and all that, the dedicated legal team. But scaling is the art of coordination. And I was at WeWork, right? Which is like great product, sold like crazy, but it went bankrupt. Why? It didn't scale correctly. The finance aspect, the legal aspect, just the timing and balancing of fundraising and real estate. That's a very critical part of any business, especially one that's moving that fast and it's physical. But basically, I want to spotlight that everyone knows the value of an engineer or salesperson, but they're forgetting the 10x value of a scaler.
And it's true. Somebody who can bring it all together. I always think of those people, I think in EOS terms, like it's the integrator, the person who oversees it all and says, this is how we're all going to work together, and creates that. And a lot of times you get the business owner, they've got a big vision, but they're not great at execution. And so I look at that as execution person. But to actually have an entire team of execution people, wow, that's a whole different level, I think.
Well, I think it's a ratio. It depends on the business, the coordination efforts, but it's a ratio, right? The bigger your teams get, probably the more integrators are needed. The more complex and moving parts, probably more the integrators needed. But you need both. To have arteries without the kidneys, not going to work either. But you need both.
No, very true. So you talk about horizontal generalist as a term. Can you help us understand that?
Yeah. So I'll talk in kind of blanket statements, but for a long time, business, if you look at business as a whole, small was generally unsophisticated, small business, or paid less interesting, less prestigious. Look at, the top students who come out of, the top schools, they want to go to investing, Wall Street, management consulting, corporate, PG&E, McDonald's, Coca-Cola, Amex, right? Corporate. Big meant Amazon, big meant prestigious and stable and all that. That was for the longest time kind of what the world was like. And then all of a sudden, tech came. Tech, because of the unique nature of capital light, speed, high margins, and it's eating the world, created hyperscale early stage, where small and sophisticated came together, or small and complicated came together. Whereas before, once again, small was kind of like more simple. You didn't attract like the most overachieving people, just, as a blanket statement. So it was just not as complicated or fast. And then the money came. Tech became very profitable. So then you get talent. You get all these really talented, people from McKinsey or Goldman Sachs or Amazon or wherever saying, you know what, let me try this early stage thing. But before, if you said, I'm going to go to Series A 12-person company, people would look at you weird. Like, why would you go to Stanford to do that? Or, whatever. Why don't you go to... So that started early stage generalists, because as a human physics and business are, the larger an organization, the more humans specialize. That's just the kind of way the human brain works. You can categorize. That's the legal team. That's the sales team. I kind of joke, I think IBM, I'm going to make this up, has like 200 people who just do payroll. That's all they do, right? So think about it. The bigger it gets, the more specialized. The smaller you get, the less specialized, right? That's just the way kind of the spectrum. If there's only 10 people at a company still needs to do all the things. It needs to do payroll, but guess what? You only have 10 people. So you have to start having people that do more than one function. So the value skill set and the needs of early stage are more generalism, more multi-hat. And then of larger is more specialty in general. Okay, so if you follow me like that, tech exploded over the last 15, 20 years. Startups became not a hobby, but a profession. And you started professionalizing hyperscale small companies. So the talent DNA started moving up, compensation started moving up, and you started developing a whole profession that really has never been a thing before. And I call it scaler, or, as a generalist. But generalist is a bad term, right? You don't say, oh, I'm a generalist. You know what that means to people? You're mediocre and you're not great at anything. And then the last thing I'll say is just to kind of wrap up the idea of what's happening. In the military, you have Army, Navy, Air Force, which are enormous organizations, right? They're specialists. You have a tank driver, submarine driver, mechanic for a plane, which makes sense. But then 100 years ago, Special Forces was created. Special Forces is Delta Force, Navy SEALs, Rangers. Why do you need to create a whole new division? They're more for nimble guerrilla warfare, 10 people going in on a mission. They are generalists for the most part. a Navy SEAL or Delta Force, they have to have a lot of different, a cross-function understanding of battle, shooting, teaching, explosives, medical, right? They're not any one thing. They're generally not a submarine mechanic, right? That's the same thing that happened in business. We have guerrilla warfare in business now. So scalers, to me specifically, are the special forces of business. They get dropped in and out, may not be a long battle. They got to get this thing to work under high pressure, and you got to know a little bit about everything. That is what's happening in the business world today.
Interesting. And things always change. People shift where they go, follow the money. Have you ever heard of the book Range, where generalists triumph? Yeah, in a specialized world. And that's what it talks about, is that it people thought specialization was great. And yes, it is in very niche things. But when you're so specialized, you don't see how the whole thing fits together. And it becomes very hard to move IBM, doesn't it? Because trying to get anything done is impossible. Whereas in a small company, we can get stuff done this morning and we can make it move. And that to me is a lot more fun to be able to work in that type of an environment.
Yeah, absolutely.
So for the small business owner, how do they think about this? How do you even find that generalist in a sense? How do you determine if that person has, because I'm guessing it's somewhat of a personality type and it's somewhat of a way they're built. And I know that because that's kind of how I'm built.
Yeah, as part of this book I'm trying to write, one chapter is the personality and persona, or the DNA. Because I've spoken to so many scalers, I started to see the pattern. I mean, I would consider myself one of them, which is I strongly believe humans are like breeds, like dog breeds. They're born with certain strengths and proclivities that match up with certain professions, like the artist or the mathematician. In the corporate world, there's the people that are really good at sales, the people that are really good at accounting. So I kind of joke, if you've ever been to a lawyer conference or a dentist conference or a sales, do you think it's a coincidence they all look alike? They all act alike? Do you think that's a coincidence? No. It's because the traits about them make them a little bit better, at something than another. And so, yes, scalers are more horizontal. So it's harder to see the pattern as compared to lawyers or doctors or engineers. But the integrators, the generalists, the scalers, what I've seen is one is they generally are very curious, right? So they don't really like to kind of just be one thing. They like to be in all the things. There's an artist element to them, creativity, creation, innovation, disruption, problem solving. They really like to tinker and say, okay, how are we going to take this chaos and make it organized? Meaning they kind of run towards problems and find it interesting, versus some other personas are like, screw that. Like, I'd rather a stable, cleaner corporate environment than chaos, disruption, innovation. They're generally more risk seeking, though they're going to lean in more to risk. Impatient, a lot of neurodivergence like ADHD is indexed in there. Similarly, kind of bored easily, need that dopamine stimulant high, right? So when you take risk, disruption, high volatility, it attracts that type of person. I can keep going on, but yes, there's a very distinctive personality for entrepreneurs and early stage.
How do you find them?
Well, Operators Guild was one of those. I was trying to find my own people, and I didn't fit in a box like just finance and I found them through, the group. One is it's getting more formalized now. So people in functions at early stage that are COOs, CFOs, that are strategic, biz ops, chief of staff, that are by nature doing the job already of cross function and doing it well. Well, that's one way to find them is looking at their LinkedIn and seeing what they do. The other is you can kind of tell if someone is a little bored and not interested in doing one thing. Like, for example, a good example is, there's people that are career salespeople, or they're good at it, they love it, they're happy with it. I could do sales, but I don't know if I could really primarily do sales. So when you talk to someone, you can kind of tell if there's someone super interested in a lot of things. They're always side hustling. They're thinking like systems. They always want to solve problems cross-functionally. You'll start to see people who want to be more vertical versus horizontal. Operators Guild is another answer. Is we are literally home to some of the best tech scalers in the world. So there's also organizations, groups, but also just, paying attention.
When I looked at the group, and maybe it's just my vision, I see what I want. It looked like there were a lot of finance people.
Finance is about 30% of the group. COO ops is about another 25, 30%. Then you have what I call special ops. That's biz ops, chief of staff, folks that not with big teams, but I kind of internal consulting. That's another 25%. And then the remainder is early stage founders.
I find, and I know you said this is old news to you, but I find a lot of people are late to bring in the finance part.
Yes, and increasingly so. That's gotten better. But finance in not the investing world. So in the investing world, Manhattan, Wall Street, finance is deemed to be like the first class citizen.
Mm-hmm.
When I left Wall Street to go to tech, it was the third class citizen. But 12 years ago, I came to Silicon Valley from New York, and I was asked, do I code or do I sell? They literally asked me, do you code or do you sell? I'm like, I can try, but I do things called finance, business operations. I clean toilets, I do the generalist thing that I didn't realize how to describe it at the time. And like, oh, are you the accountant? Do you do the budget? I was like, oh, I could, but it's more, strategic finance and planning and fundraise and all the businessy things. And at the time, they was like, what do you mean? You know what matters is product and sales. The rest just counts cash, pays the payroll, keeps us out of jail. It's just like, you're just like the back office. And so finance was just deemed to be like a necessary evil. Oh, we need the accountant to do the taxes and to sort the departmental expenses. Over time, more advanced finance DNA has entered the smaller company world and started to up-level from FP&A, financial planning and analysis, to strategic finance. And that, I think, you can now call it business intelligence, right? Now with AI, the finance seat is becoming much more strategic. What I call business first, finance second. So that's where the finance organization has advanced, and people are not hiring as late. Now, there's a difference between hiring, I guess, specialists late early, like an accountant or someone that's very focused, versus a strategic finance leader or strategic finance integrators. I think people see the value of them now that are exponential rather than linear. And the more of them there are, the more people see it, the more they refer others. And a common trait is they come from things like investment banking, they come from investing because they are trained in the art of business first. So over time, I think the finance function has gotten a lot more credit and is a lot more strategic. But yes, if you just think of the finance function as back office accounting, you probably should look into more forward, front-facing strategic finance.
And I think that's a different kind of person who comes from a very different background. So they behave very, very differently. You work with a lot of AI in the startup world, don't you?
Yes.
I am thinking in what you're talking about, AI is playing into a big part of this game now to be a generalist. How is that all coming together, and how are you guys seeing, and what are you doing with AI?
Yeah, it's becoming more and more clear to me. The next phase of AI is agents. There's AI that is specialized in doing something. It could be legal, it could be CRM stuff, it could be note-taking. And it's going to move toward, millions of agents that have specialty that talk to one another, which is basically similar to how humans work, right? Humans have specialty and we talk to each other. You talk to each other. And that's how business works, right? You just coordinate between humans. The only difference now is humans plus agents. So that's what's slowly happening is agents are entering the world. The accounting agent, you have a legal agent, and then you have a human that interacts with them. I think over time that mix is going to shift. More agents will do the things that humans don't need to do anymore. I think there'll be still a coordination layer for some time. The other thing we're seeing is this goes back to integrators or scalers. I think specialists are the most at risk. Anything that's kind of formulaic or expert in nature or repetitive in nature, et cetera. For example, bookkeeping, or I guess writing for language, is the first to get replaced with AI agents. Maybe not 100% replaced, but obviously a lot of that more mundane or rote stuff, like matching invoices, all that, right? It's in theory, a computer can do. That starts leaving more senior roles, like for example, the litigation attorney versus the paralegal, right? You have more senior type strategic or complicated specialists and integrators. So the integrators, someone called it AI maestro. It's like the coordinator of AI managers. And why is that? In the end of the day, business, it's a business, right? So you have to understand parts of the business. To manage the marketing agent and the finance agent, you generally need some sense of understanding of finance and marketing. And that's where integrators come in. We are so used to doing cross-functional work. The difference is rather than a human, it's a human and a robot, or human and an agent. So integrators and scalers now are becoming more and more leaned upon to be the higher mix of the population, and human specialists are being less and less. The other way of, that we see is, to put it more bluntly, right, there's if you're an owner, one thing AI does is potentially help you increase your profit margins. A $100,000 person, in theory, could be now a $200 a month AI agent. That's a lot of money to your bottom line. Like, can you blame owners for increasing profit? So what does that mean for an owner? They look at their biggest expense, generally payroll, human payroll. And I think there's only two buckets: those they can replace with AI and those that are invaluable because they leverage AI. So becoming invaluable versus replaced is, I think, also what's happening. If you're someone at a company that is just leveraging AI and you are doing 10x more as a single human because of AI, I think you're going to have a job. So that's another thing we're seeing is leaning in, embracing AI and bringing it all the time to the company.
I use AI all day long. I find that my AI is starting to become human. And what I mean by this is it's getting lazy. It's giving me wrong answers and it's not doing what I told it to do. Okay. Which I think there was just a big news article this morning about Amazon deploying stuff with AI agents or AI coding, and they had some major blowups. And now they had to pull back. I'm finding that you really have to know enough to challenge it, to ask it the right questions, to double check its work, to make sure that the things connected correctly. And even when it works once, it doesn't mean it's going to work correctly the next time. So you've got to build in kind of guardrails and systems. That's why I love when a person uses AI, because now I'm moving faster and I know enough. But if I don't know enough and I just take the AI answer,
Exactly.
then we've got a problem. So it's moving faster than anything's ever moved. But at the same point, I think we're going to go through some major blow-ups of people moving a little too fast. Elon loves to move fast. That's Elon. He likes to blow things up. Other people struggle with that.
I think like any new anything, there's a trial and error process. I think the framework I've liked regarding AI is you first have to, well, like anything, you have to understand the risk. For example, if it's AI for healthcare, meaning AI for warfare, you really need to slow down. Like you really need to get that right. It's people's lives, right? If you're talking AI for project management, you can go a little faster. And I do believe you have to break stuff and learn to master something. So I do think that's the modulator, right? Is the risk of it of it being boring. So I think businesses are leaning a little bit more forward with like try it and see. That they need to have like, if it goes wrong, what's the cost benefit? But there's invariably going to be things that go wrong, but that's how you learn. Hopefully it's more, innocuous things. But I'm not surprised that tech companies like Amazon are having a little bit of broken glass.
How do you feel about broken glass as you're building things? Because I think a lot of people don't like broken glass. And there's also a certain mindset, like internally people may look at it as failure versus an experiment.
You're probably talking to someone very biased. I'm sitting in the heart of Silicon Valley where it's go big, go home. So I generally tend to lean toward fast iteration, break, learn, and iterate and keep improving rather than, so I say, get to 0 to 80 real fast rather than spend all my time going from 80 to 100. And that's because we're early stage. So at early stage, it's just, there's no need to pour cement on anything because it's changing so fast. So velocity and nimbleness, at least in tech or AI, is a virtue. That's where I think air quote broken glass is probably more beneficial than not, depending on what it is. Once again, if it's healthcare, safety, right? That's no. People's payroll, like make sure slow down. But I really do think you have to pick your battles. But when it comes to innovation, product, I think taking some risk is a very important thing. Being too conservative and things that are not life and death, et cetera, I actually think are going to cost you to get second place.
What's the failure rate like in your world? When I say failure rate, companies that don't make it.
I mean, it depends on what you define as don't make it. I'm sure ChatGPT will have great stats on this, but I think in general, my random guess is probably something like, 70, 80% of startups, tech startups, don't make it in terms of highly profitable or bought or IPO. So yeah, I think it's that. I mean, it's a kind of a power law. And then there's a few that make it really big.
So this is the age-old question. At what point do you start taking a profit versus plowing all your money back into growth?
I'm going to give you the McKinsey HBS answer. Whenever the profit return back in the business is greater than the profit invested elsewhere. If you put in $1 and it generates $3, more in the business, you probably should keep going unless you have something that generates $4 or $5 elsewhere for shareholders. But really, it's a reinvestment calculation. And so certain businesses, some growth initiatives are going to be worth it. And you can keep burning money because it generates more money, right? It's just the law of math. Others are like, we're striving for growth campaigns that don't really do anything. We're just literally making up stuff. At that point, you should probably dividend the cash back out, focus, not expand, deepen. And
How do you determine between those two?
I mean, that's where I think experience, understanding of business, having seen enough businesses, being a student, an understanding of business is important. I think all businesses have first principles. They go back to a product, the cost of marketing, the cost of maintaining. It all goes back to business physics. So if you understand business physics, I think you just break it apart, right? And then I think you do the exercises. Okay, well, what do you want? You want $1 million for what? Okay, well, how much is it going to cost? How long is it going to take? Is it $1 million or $1.5 million? Can we start with 200,000 and test if this works? What is the expected return? It could be customers, it could be higher retention, which can all be roughly quantified. So I think one thing is you roughly quantify a hypothesis, then you test small and fast. If it starts to work, give it more fuel. And that's the formula. So sometimes the answer is we don't know, we need to try. So one of the ideas is try.
I find a lot of business owners are extremely optimistic.
Yeah.
And being the finance guy, I tend to be, I'm not going to say the word pessimistic. I'm going to say prove it. And just kind of like you said, this is going to work. All right, before we commit $1 million, how about we commit 10,000?
Exactly.
And test it.
Exactly.
And then we'll commit 50 and see if the 10,000 was luck or reality. And now that the 50, and then we do 100 or 200 and the 200 works, then we go to 5 and just scale it up quickly. I just find a lot of people don't take the time to necessarily do the math, but they're living in a different world than you are.
No, I think all the frameworks apply. Now, I think speed and resources are what changes things, or complexity. But no, I think the beauty of optimism or confidence is what makes the world go round. I do think, to your point, it's about measured risk, not reckless risk for all things. Translation, I think taking no risk and being super conservative, unless it's like something that needs to be, like medicine trials or something like that, is a bad thing. But this is what I meant by, broken glass, trial and error. For me to learn AI, I need to break some stuff. I need to learn what didn't work at small scale to finally find what works. So accepting air quote failure or things not working, I think is a critical to success.
No, I agree with you. One of the things that you've probably seen is how fast growth and complexity cause massive amounts of trouble. So what have you seen with that in your experience?
I've seen both, by the way. So I think the laws of nature are volatility cuts both ways. OpenAI was a massive success. WeWork had a lot of volatility and leverage and suffered bankruptcy. Both are very explosive, risk-taking, forward-leaning. So I think it's the laws of risk reward. If you want to do a lifestyle bootstrap business, it's lower downside potentially because you're managed, but in theory you're not going to get explosive upside either, right? It's kind of the laws of no free lunch. Where you want to go big, go fast, land grab. Uber had a ton of lawsuits in the beginning. They asked for forgiveness, and guess what? Very successful business. They went head to head with taxi drivers. Things got ugly, but it was a service and product that was better, and customers said so. So I think you just have to pick your poison of what type of volatility you want for upside, downside. Yeah.
Do you see a point where it goes opposite? Because I'll be honest, in today's world, I'm almost going back to cabs, and I wonder, is that same thing? AI is explosive right now. Does it come back to a point where we've got to find a new balance or a new way? Or
yeah, I think in general, anything extreme is probably not great. Anything. Social media, to some extent, can be helpful, but also extreme, not good. AI for sure is something that I think the scariest thing about AI and what's concerning is it's one of the few technologies that I think man may not fully understand. At least the nuclear bomb, like the creators understand how it works and what it does, I think. AI is like, I don't know why it's doing what it's doing. That is concerning. It's even hard to regulate something you don't understand how to regulate. And yes, so in that sense, I am concerned that for every ethical, conservative, thoughtful player, there's someone that's not. And unfortunately, the incentive will be, well, if my opponent or enemy is going to take risks and try to get an advantage, shouldn't I? I don't want to be the second place player in a war game or whatever, a business battle. That is the concern, is that the bad actors are going to push this probably farther than, faster than me. So I think there's definitely risks in the AI world of getting back to basics. But unfortunately, I think human incentive and the way things work and the way money, makes the world go around is that it's going to go faster and faster and faster because that's what the incentive is. Because the prize is so exponentially big. But I think Mark Zuckerberg said it. He's like, the price of falling behind is far greater than overspending and keeping up.
And they are overspending right now. There's no doubt about it. Is there anything you wanted to touch on we didn't get a chance to?
I mean, no, I think, for me, I want to help all the scalers in the world, the people who build, the entrepreneurs who love the art of business and would love to help them any way I can, whether that's through the Community Operators Guild. Fog Ventures is our investing arm. So as the buyers and builders, we invest in some of the best B2B tech companies in the world at any stage. So we'd welcome any people that want to contribute to community, both investing, education, events, therapy. It's the love of the game, as you know. And yeah, that's it. It's just anywhere I can help personally, professionally. I'd love to, because I want to really sponsor the human breeds that love to build and have said, you know what, being a specialist or corporate is not my thing. And I want to scale things.
Awesome. And we'll make sure to put all your contact info in the show notes. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for listening to this unedited video of the Profit Answer Man podcast. If you'd like to catch the full episode and learn more about what we do, check us out at profitcomesfirst.com. We also go through the Profit First book in each and every chapter in the beginning episodes of the podcast, so check those out as well. Thanks for listening, and here's to you having a more profitable and growing business.